You're listening to our podcast of Eddie Mair on LBC.
It's 4 o'clock. Here are the headlines. Red list scramble to escape Mexico.
Unfortunately now with this inexplicable situation that we now have, that everything's all up in the air, unfortunately.
NHS England says a fifth of COVID hospital admissions are aged 18 to 35 as pings fall.
It will be a relief to small businesses, particularly the hospitality industry, pubs, restaurants and so on, that have been struggling to staff shifts because so many people are being told to isolate.
7 men jailed for more than 200 years for murdering a law student.
We were able to put together all the numerous pieces of a large jigsaw puzzle and establish the motive behind the shooting and who was involved.
Also tonight, the Mound labelled London's worst tourist attraction.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Eddie Mair.
Welcome to the programme. After 6 tonight, are you living on the minimum or living wage? What is it like? Much more on tonight's news, including the attraction in London that's been described as London's worst. We've also got the very latest on cladding, the cladding crisis that we've talked about many times. Right now, though, let's start the programme, as we should every night, by quoting Elton John. In February, Sir Elton wrote a piece for The Guardian talking about his days touring on the continent and the importance of touring to the music business. Sir Elton wasn't just taking a stroll down the yellow brick memory lane for fun. He wanted to draw attention to a crisis facing musicians and performers and everyone who supports them on the road. Here's part of what Sir Elton wrote back in February. Music is one of Britain's greatest cultural exports. It contributed £5.8 billion to the British economy in 2019, but was left out of the Brexit trade negotiations when other industries weren't. Workers from some professions are still allowed to travel on business without applying for a visa, but not musicians. Either the Brexit negotiators didn't care about musicians, or didn't think about them, or weren't sufficiently prepared. They screwed up. It's ultimately down to the British government to sort it out. They need to go back and renegotiate. Sir Elton John, writing in The Guardian in February. We're talking about this tonight, all these months later, because there has been a change. And this hour, I want to hear from you if you're directly affected by the news that musicians and performers from the UK will be able to tour in some European countries without needing a visa or a work permit. Many times in recent months, musicians have got in touch when we've been speaking about the effects of the pandemic on people's lives. And they've told me how tough and unpredictable things have been. And they told me many times that they felt forgotten and sidelined. So please, if you're one of those people, tell me now what this news means to you. 0345 60 60 973. You can text 84850. The Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport has negotiated with 19 EU countries, so it's not blanket across the EU, 19 countries, to allow musicians and performers from the UK to conduct short tours without visas. These countries are Austria, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia and Sweden. What does this news mean for you? We're talking about a huge business encompassing not just the performers, but everyone who's part of any tour of any kind, the people in sound, in lighting, in promotion, transport, at the venues themselves, and so on. Let me know. 0345 60 60 973. Ross Patel is Chief Executive of Whole Entertainment, a music agency which looks after several artists who tour mainly in the rest of Europe. Welcome to the programme. What do you think of the news?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and as always, your brilliant summaries, kind of prior to jumping in. But I have to laugh. You know, this isn't news. And we're incredibly frustrated as an industry. It feels like a bit of a spin job that's been kind of put out with this statement.
Okay.
This has been the situation for a while now. And as you rightly said, and as Elton John put it, and as many of the artists and managers that get in touch with you have highlighted, there are still so many issues that need to be resolved that haven't been addressed in the making of this statement. And the position, I don't think, has really changed that much. Certainly not from where I'm sat with kind of touring artists. I'm still battling the same issues that I was before.
Well, there's lots to pick through there, isn't there? First of all, you saying that there's really nothing new here. So this list of 19 countries that the DCMS proudly trumpeted, what's wrong with it?
There have been, ongoing negotiations with each of the member states, but as you'll know, that each state has their own set of rules. So saying that now we can freely travel to all 19 of these countries, it's not accurate. Some of them will have their own conditions for entry, but also 19. There's 27. There's 27 countries to consider there, and some of the major countries that are vital for sensible and well-placed routing for tours are not included in there, and we still don't have answers on those countries. Taking Spain as an example, whether it's a hard ticket tour in a venue or whether we're looking at festival shows, the likes of Benicassim or Sonar, we don't have answers. Where we do have answers, it's looking increasingly expensive for any artist to enter that country, and that could mean the make or break of an entire tour.
This is obviously not the renegotiation that Sir Elton John and others wanted. This is, as you say, a country-by-country discussion that's gone on.
Yeah, and it does exactly that, and it doesn't feel as though we're any further along than where we should have been. It feels like a bit of a loose statement as far as what's actually changed and what's possible for us now. And it's disappointing. I think it's fair for people to feel like the cultural industries have been sidelined and not heard, and that they were completely left out of the Brexit agreement altogether, which is exactly what it felt like when we were told in February. And this doesn't really feel like much has changed on that, which is unfortunate.
Can you give me an idea if I wanted to organise my one-man show touring some of the countries on this list, for example? What sort of hoops will I need to jump through to perhaps perform in France, Germany, and Hungary?
So there, I think you are now able to tour on short-term visas where they're easy enough to get, and there's relatively little cost on the visa side. But I think what we should factor in is the implications of COVID and of Brexit that don't include just entry across a border. We need to now factor in: are you going to be able to get there? What are the cabotage issues that you might face in terms of being able to take vehicles from the UK and enter into European countries and then return? And I think these are all aspects that can get forgotten about or not included in the conversation. As with everything with music is a line that runs throughout many different parts of the industry, and it affects many different types of organisation and company that interact with it. And it needs to be looked at in a more holistic view. And I think that's the one thing that hasn't happened throughout these negotiations.
Good to hear from you. Thanks so much for being part of the conversation. Ross Patel, Chief Executive of Whole Entertainment. Geoff Oddie is guitarist for Wolf Alice. You've been listening to all of that. Tell me how this chimes with you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of put this in a context first. So, the music industry has been absolutely battered over the last, 18 months, 2 years from COVID. About 70% of artists' recording income comes from live revenue. And we need touring to be able to scrape back, some of the losses that we've incurred in that time period. Europe is one of the biggest touring, is the biggest foreign touring market for UK artists. And now we've got a situation where the barriers to entry are just huge all of a sudden. And in regard to the government announcement, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the people at the FAC and UK Music that I've been speaking to today, this isn't a new agreement. This isn't a treaty. This is absolutely not new information. What the government have essentially done is stipulated a list of 19 countries where there is currently, at the moment, the opportunity to do some visa and permit-free touring. So there's no new information here. We haven't got anything different. And all of these 19 countries have vastly different rules. Some will allow up to 5 days, some up to 90 days. Some you'll have to talk to local authorities before you come in, border agencies, etc. Some you won't have to do. So it's still hugely convoluted, hugely difficult to be able to grasp from a touring perspective. We need information, and we're just not getting any of it. So it's pretty disheartening, really. And I'm sorry to sound so cynical, but this isn't anything new. It feels like spin, and it feels very underhand from our perspective.
It might be difficult to quantify this, but clearly here we have Brexit, and we also have COVID, and they're complicating each other. And lots of businesses obviously are affected by COVID and by Brexit. Do you have any sense of what proportion of this is COVID and what proportion is Brexit when we think about the problems that you and others face?
Oh, well, like I say, at the moment, 70% of our income and most recording artists' income comes from touring. So the last couple of years, 70% of our income across the board, that's been wiped away. So people have had to survive on 30%, comes from streaming, which, as we know from the reports that have been happening, it barely touches the side. So it's been very difficult. Obviously artists are mostly self-employed. The people that work around it, the mostly self-employed, have fallen in the gap between furlough and all the other schemes. So you have that in terms of COVID. And touring, like I've said, Europe is the biggest market outside of the UK for UK artists. So if you take that away, how are we supposed to kind of, get back the losses we've made and, start doing proper business again? This doesn't make any sense. And, like I've said before, I spoke to you a little while ago, this covers more than just artists. This is all the people that work around it in the industries. And we've got ridiculous situations now where, a UK haulage company can only do 3 drops in Europe before it comes home. How are we supposed to tour around Europe? How are we supposed to employ UK companies? Cutting off our nose to spite our face. At the moment, splitter vans. So they're kind of transit vans that are cut in half, where the band will sit in, a driver, and the other bit you'll put your gear, your amps and your drum kit, and a couple of t-shirts maybe. At the moment, it's illegal to use a UK splitter van in Europe. It's a disaster for artists and all the people working around it. It really is.
Good to see you again. Thank you. Geoff O'Donoghue is a guitarist for Wolf Alice. And both of our guests, Ross and Geoff, are right. This is it's not just a vast business encompassing more than just the performers, musicians and so on. But the other thing is it affects everybody differently. And I know from the conversations we've had over the months, I remember hearing from people who were essentially single-person operations, working out of a van, who used to drive across Europe and ply their trade and perform. And for them, this has been devastating. But there are others, the events business, all the backup that these performers require, who are suffering and have been for months. I wonder whether you are in tune with what Ross and Geoff are saying, that this announcement means nothing. Tell me how you have been getting on. Are you still even in the business? Do you consider yourself a former artist, a former performer, or a lighting technician, or engineer, or driver? Let me know how it is. 0345 6060 973. Big announcement from the DCMS suggesting that things are going to be much easier, but 2 guests already saying this is a spin job. Geoff called it underhand. What about you? Text 84850 and call 0345 6060 973. Multi-billion pound business in peril. Does this do enough? 4:17 now. Here's Thomas Watts with the news.
Eddie Mair on LBC.
With Sage, financial tools to take control of business.
The combination of COVID and Brexit has made it extremely difficult for untold numbers of people whose job, whose income relies on being able to tour across Europe. Now, there have been complaints about this for an extremely long time. At the beginning of the programme, I quoted Sir Elton John, who was pretty blunt in his assessment. He believed the British government had screwed up It's ultimately down to the government to sort out, he said. They need to go back and renegotiate. Well, that renegotiation has not happened. As I've reported, the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport has, it says, negotiated with 19 EU countries, it says, to allow musicians and performers from the UK to conduct short tours visa-free. But as we heard from Ross Patel, the chief executive of Whole Entertainment, and from Geoff Audie, the guitarist for Wolf Alice, they believe this is just a spin job. This is nonsense. Nothing has changed. The difficulties remain. So tell me, what's this doing to your life and your livelihood? Perhaps you're one of the many people we've heard from over the months who used to work in this sort of entertainment, but have had to completely change because it's no longer viable for you. Ross talked about the huge difficulties of trying to do something which in and of itself is quite a complex operation, but is now made extremely expensive, prohibitively so sometimes, and certainly extremely complicated. We heard from Geoff about how much live touring means to the music business, how important that money is. Let me know about you, because people operating on their own or in companies, everyone has suffered. What does this announcement mean? And tell me how things are for you now. 0345 6060973. The music business creates almost £6 billion of income for the British economy. And that's just the music business. This is about all kinds of performing across the continent. 0345 6060973. Charles is called in. Charles, tell me about you. What do you do?
I'm a tour manager for musicians.
And take me back to before Brexit, before COVID. What was your job like?
It was just easy. We could just go anywhere in Europe, and there was no restrictions. There was a few different tax arrangements with each different territory, but essentially we could just cross borders with no hindrance and take whatever equipment we liked with us.
So back in those days, what was your biggest headache? What was the stuff that used to worry you most then?
Well, just getting the band to the gig.
Just the basics. What about now?
Well, it just seems that it's a really cynical attempt by the government to try and grab the headlines to say that everything's all right, and it just isn't. You know, and it's a pattern of behaviour because it's been occurring with all these COVID test events and stuff. Nobody ever finds out, what the viability of the events are. I mean, I've arranged gigs throughout the summer where, there's hundreds of thousands of pounds, balancing on it. And we're waiting for the government to make their mind up about whether they're going to let a festival proceed. And by the time they've made their mind up about anything, the festival's had to cancel. They just haven't got any regard whatsoever for musicians or creative industries because we don't vote for them. Simple as that.
Well, we might come on to the politics of that. Just on the practicalities of touring, what kind of touring is being done on the continent now?
Well, to be honest, not very much because, it's difficult to book, for the bands I'm working with, it's difficult even to book shows in Europe just because of all the COVID stuff. I mean, it's gradually opening up, but I've got nothing on the cards for next year when usually I'd have, loads of shows to do in Europe.
And what about your musicians? What about the bands? What are they doing for money?
Well, I mean, they're all right because they've been successful in the past. But I know a lot of people who've worked with me who've had to find alternative employment. I mean, I don't know. It's just really difficult. I mean, it's so annoying to try and package, existing arrangements into some kind of victory over the European Union when all they need to do is just sit round a table and agree a reciprocal, arrangement.
And to come to the question I was talking to Geoff Audie about, is it can you take COVID out of the equation? Let's hope for the day that COVID isn't around. If these post-Brexit arrangements stay as they are, what will your job be like?
Well, I mean, my job will be okay because I work for musicians who can afford to do it. But there's other people who are now who used to just get in a van with a small band, go all around Europe, play loads of gigs, and come back again. That's just not possible anymore.
And there's all the support staff too. It's not just obviously the musicians.
Well, exactly. And a lot of the support staff have fell by the wayside down to the COVID, I don't know, incompetence from the government. And I don't know.
And when you say that people in your business don't vote for the government, is that... I mean, some people must vote Conservative who work in your business, but you think that predominantly they don't?
Well, yeah, I do. And it's no surprise. You know, like I work with bands from Australia and New Zealand who've managed to play 30 or 40 gigs this year. You know, if Johnson wouldn't have let the Johnson variant in, then, perhaps we could have had a domestic music industry and all the festivals happening, but no.
Do you think the business is taken seriously? Do you think the industry is taken seriously?
No, I don't. And it should be. I don't think... I mean, I'm no fan of Johnson and his cable, but I just think this government are completely incompetent on so many levels. And we just see examples of it day in and day out. I mean, look at the holiday, the travel restrictions. You know, they can't make a decision, and there's billions of pounds resting on their chaos.
But I'm looking at a tweet here from Paul in Lewisham who says, as a part-time musician, this was one of the first things I called even before the Brexit vote. Also, please mention the UK music industry is about 5 times larger than fishing. Now,
exactly.
I take him at his word. Well, maybe. In which case, and we know all the anxiety there was about sorting out a fishing deal. So why not? Why do you think? But I know you don't like Boris Johnson and his government, but why would a government of any political shade choose to ignore such a big business?
Because they just wanted to get Brexit done. You know, they just wanted to justify one of the ridiculous slogans. I'm sorry, but it just makes me really angry.
And you and people you know are the collateral damage from that. Exactly. Do you know people who've just given up altogether and got out of the business?
Yeah, totally.
What are they doing now?
Well, people like delivery drivers. You know, somebody I know is trained to be a teacher, which is fine. You know, people are just trying to make money how they can.
I wonder what happens to all that talent.
Well, it just goes and we'll have to retrain people.
Charles, good to hear from you. Thanks very much. Let me know how it is for you. 0345 6060 973. So far, not a good word from anyone in the business for how the government has treated people in music and entertainment. They screwed up, says Elton John. Charles saying they've been ignored. We've heard that this announcement is just a spin job. What about you? Perhaps you're one of the people who has got out of the entertainment business in its broadest sense and are maybe now a delivery driver. 0345 6060 973. Is this right? Was this entire industry ignored to get Brexit done? 0345 6060 973. 4:30, here's Thomas Watts with the news.
Eddie Mair on LBC.
With Sage. Get your business taxes right first time.
Lots of headlines today about an announcement from the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport negotiating 19 deals with EU countries to allow musicians and performers from the UK to conduct short tours visa-free. After many months of complaint from so many people in the business, including, as we reported, Sir Elton John. So far, nobody on the programme's had a good word to say about it. And I mean people who are at the sharp end of this, in the heart of the music and entertainment business. What about you? 0345 6060 973. Lewis is in Canning Town. Hi, Lewis. Tell me what you do.
I'm a musician. I run a studio. I'm a front man in a band. I teach music. I do whatever I can musical, really. That's my main job.
And how have things been?
Things have been sort of up and down. It's been a bit down for us because we was on the up, but I think it's evened the playing field out a little bit.
Well, tell me why.
Because, so some stars, for example, some people didn't even do music. They got put into lockdown, so they got creative. And then they've put it online, and now they've got more followers than some people that have been touring for decades. So...
Tell me about your band.
My band, am I allowed to say the name of the band?
Of course you are.
Oh, we are Dishy Tangent.
Dishy Tangent.
Yeah, DISHYTANGENT.
Whose idea was that?
The
name, I mean.
Yeah, it was an Xbox default name, to be honest. and I thought, that sounds quite good. And then I looked up the words and that, and I thought, yeah.
Okay.
We'll have that.
Dishy Tangent. How long's Dishy Tangent been going?
About 7 years now.
And who's in it?
Me, frontman, Lewis Bowers. We've got Wayne Maynard on the guitar, Jason Everett on the drums, Delitso Sejuandani on the bass, and Fitzware Mackay on the keyboard.
And your drummer, does he own the drums or rent them?
He owns them. We've got a drum kit at the studio as well.
Okay.
He's endorsed by Mapex. So
bless him. So touring, have you tried to tour in the EU, across Europe?
We haven't, no. But we've done a lot of stuff in England which got cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got good connections in Portugal, but so obviously I think that's going to be a bit of a problem now.
And what are people in your business, when you talk about the music business, it's clearly a huge part of your life, Lewis. What has COVID and what has Brexit for touring people done?
Well, COVID has it's completely turned everything upside down. So people was investing a lot of money and taking a lot of big risks, and now there's no cover for their insurance or anything, so they're not willing to take the risk.
What's your band going to do?
Well, we're mainly about the music, so we're just going to carry on making music, enjoying ourselves. We've managed to have a few gigs during the lockdown. There's been socially distanced gigs. But we had a big one cancelled. We were meant to play Teenage Cancer Trust at Royal Albert Hall with Chic and Noel Rodgers. And that got cancelled last year, cancelled this year. But
are you able to make a living still in music?
Yes, and a lot of it's to do with the royalties and stuff now. So if you've got a good online presence, it does help. But our main thing was merchandise and doing gigs. So the studio, the teaching, kids still want piano lessons, guitar lessons. So you can still make ends meet, but I think it has, like I say, it's evened out the playing field. So, because internet's so powerful these days, you can be sitting in your bedroom and make millions of pounds just if you make the right songs.
Do you have a good singing voice, Lewis?
Yeah, it's all right. Maybe not good enough for LBC, but...
Well, I'm not that choosy. What's your most requested song? At Dishy Tangent, I mean.
Yeah, we don't do covers. Our most requested one, Getting By, but that's more rap, because I rap as well, rap and sing.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Well, I'm waiting to hear a little bit of it.
You want to hear a little bit of it?
Yeah, there's no swearing, is there?
No, we're family friendly.
Okay.
Oh, you want a little bit of rapping now on LBC?
Why not? Why not?
This is my moment. All right. What if I told you that I don't need anybody? Would you believe me if I said I was never sorry? What if I eventually tried to spend some time with friends of mine? Now, would that be a better story? Thinking, damn, it brings me down when I sing with bands but can't link the fans to drinks and rands. Instead, hop back in the van, hoping that it brings us grand. But at least we make it dance and we appreciate the chance. We're keeping it real, won't cheat to make the charts. Went on tour for a week away in Brazil. I'm sure that no sleep was making me ill. Went from growing up on a VO, now I'm on a visa flying over Rio. Thanks though, cheers bro, obrigado. I'm that Virgo, raised by a Leo. That's all I'll give you for that.
Loved it. Thanks for calling in, Lewis. You see, not only are we talking about music and how important it is as a business, we're actually putting musicians on the air. 0345 6060 973. You don't have to perform, but I would like to know how you're getting on with COVID and particularly with Brexit, if you are normally touring on the continent. 0345 6060 973. Now, as always around this time, we bring all the COVID headlines together in one place. Here's our regular COVID report tonight with LBC's Lindsay Alder.
The Transport Secretary says families can go on holiday this summer without having to worry about sudden change to the coronavirus restrictions. From Sunday, the extra quarantine rules for France will be dropped and 7 European countries are moving to the green list. Grant Shapp says there'll be no more changes this month.
Not having to sort of look over their shoulders or monitor Twitter the whole time and see when rules are changing, because we intend for these rules, barring something completely unforeseen, to remain in place throughout August so people can just go away and enjoy their breaks.
Well, Charlotte spoke to LBC just before flying to Spain from Birmingham Airport earlier.
We've had to obviously book the antigen tests for when we're out there. It was a nightmare trying to find somewhere to do it where we were as well. It was quite expensive. And also we had to book the PCR test for the day 2 when we return. We had to do that, and we had to, that was another 60 quid each. The SPTH form, which is a health form for Spain. And that was a real nightmare because we actually did it wrong.
Speaking exclusively to LBC, the chief executive of Birmingham Airport, Nick Barton, said it's positive things are going in the right direction.
It's certainly a step forward. There's no question about it. Some really very good routes added to it. But crucially, there was very little going back on where we've been previously, which I think has been an issue for many travellers.
Elsewhere today, the number of alerts sent by the NHS COVID-19 app in England and Wales has dropped dramatically. The number of people being pinged and told to self-isolate went down by 43%. Earlier this week, it was announced that the app is going to be tweaked to make it less sensitive. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 vaccine rollout in England is estimated to have directly averted nearly 67,000 hospital admissions, according to new figures from Public Health England. Previous estimates had put the figure at more than 52,000. In Wales, the Welsh Government are considering whether to approve the lifting of most remaining COVID restrictions. The First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has suggested nightclubs could open on Saturday, while social distancing would be scrapped. But one minister, Rebecca Evans, has defended leaving the decision until the last minute, with some nightlife venues planning to open at midnight on Friday.
The First Minister's trailed for a while that we could be moving to alert level 0 on the 7th of August if the public health situation allows. At the moment, we're still continuing to have discussions as a cabinet. So we met first thing this morning again to talk through some of these issues, including nightclubs and so on. So there'll be lots of further discussions going on throughout the day before the FM makes his announcements tomorrow.
Looking at how the virus is affecting other parts of the world now, Australia's second largest city, Melbourne, is going into its 6th lockdown, with a state government leader blaming the nation's slow vaccination rollout. It joins Sydney and Brisbane in locking down due to the spread of the Delta variant, and restrictions could be in place for 7 weeks. Victoria Premier Daniel Andrews says his government had no other choice because only 20% of Australian adults had been fully vaccinated. And Tokyo has reported a record 5,000 new daily COVID cases as infections surge while the Japanese capital hosts the Olympics. Their Prime Minister has denied the Games have led to a rise in infections.
Lindsay Older with the COVID report. Talking about the music business post-Brexit and in the midst of COVID, Graham says, I tour and work with many bands. This announcement is nothing but a smokescreen that hides the real problem, which is one of moving equipment and transport across EU borders. For small to medium-sized bands, the situation is now financially impossible. You can text 84850 0345 6060 973. Joe says, love that rap from Lewis. What was the name of his band again? I'll tell you after the headlines from Thomas Watts.
Eddie Mair on LBC.
With Sage. Get back to bossing your business.
We're talking about the music business after the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport started trumpeting, no pun intended, I've no idea whether they have a trumpet, this negotiation they've done with 19 EU countries. The government says it allows musicians and performers from the UK to conduct short tours visa-free, because there's been such a lot of complaint about what Brexit has done, in addition to COVID, to the ability of people in entertainment to tour on the continent. Well, as you've heard, there's been no love for the substance of this announcement. I will get to more calls, texts and tweets on this. You can call 0345 6060 973. We already heard from Lewis, who's from the band Dishy Tangent, Dishytangent. Before we get to more of that, this time tomorrow, it's Simon Marx's American Week, when he takes some time to round up everything of note that's happened in that country. Every Thursday at this time, in order to whet our appetite, Simon sends us one word, just one word, to tease us, to tempt us, to give us a clue, a preview as to what's going to be in his big American Week at this time tomorrow. We like to call it Simon Marx's American Week Word of the Week.
shame.
Now, here's Jonathan in Leeds. Jonathan, the music business. How are you getting on?
Hello. Yeah, it's been an interesting 18 months so far, and it's still not an end in sight, I don't think, for us. It's a strange, I think, compound effect from, as you say, Brexit, but obviously the COVID situation, and we're not quite sure when the end will be in sight, when we can get back to normal.
So what do you do?
So I'm most notably the blonde guy from G4 Vocal Harmony Group, and we tour traditionally extensively all over, and we have a great time doing that, and then do various other tours and shows independently around it. And it's literally just stopped when COVID, I say it was December, the last real big show that I've done. So pre the lockdown, there was no confidence in the industry to be able to continue with shows. Everything's been pulled ever since, and we've still, at the moment, decided to pull our autumn tour due to the lack of confidence with it and the inability to market in the normal way. One thing people are forgetting is how you market for shows. You see something, and when you're coming out of the show, you see a poster, a flyer for something else, and then you subsequently book. And it's a lovely perpetual cycle of confidence and fun and escapism, which is what entertainment traditionally is. And because there's not been the shows, there's not the ability to market to audiences. So that's been very difficult, and who knows when the rules will change again. And then Brexit and these rules, it's an interesting addition for us, but I don't think it's going to dramatically help bands. As somebody said prior, the issue with touring equipment is that we put it all in flight cases. There's a huge quantity of different amazing things that the guys tour for us. And you have to open every single case and prove what's in there with a carnet. And that, unless they can resolve that on top, I think it will only really help soloists going out to do oratorios and orchestras and that kind of work, which is great. And I do think that people in that side of the industry will be very, very grateful of this change. And I think it's very positive for that. But I think with bands touring and for other productions, I think it's still going to be a very difficult time.
Jonathan, good to hear from you. Thank you. Here's Paul in Nottingham. Hi, Paul. Tell me about you.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon. Yeah, our operations beyond theatre, what we specialise in is entertainment experiences. So, for instance, we've got a new show, Alicia, which is going on at Manchester Cathedral at the end of this month, and it's an immersive rock opera. The point of the conversation is that I've been listening, and it's been very interesting to hear exactly the knocking on the government, fairly perpetually, but I'm at the sharp end. We've been very badly hurt. We wrote this show to go on just as COVID decided to intervene, so we had to postpone UK tours. So we got badly hurt. But to be fair to the government, they didn't know how to deal with the virus. When they were projecting all the time with assumptions that the virus levels would be controllable. And when you look at the core problems, which at the outset were the need for good ventilation, social distancing, and mask, which were the three ingredients that were looking to control the virus, very hard to be helped to actually do the right thing for an industry that was desperately crying out for something that I don't think the government could really be expected to be able to supply.
Paul, thank you. Here's Ben next. Hi, Ben. Tell me about you.
Afternoon. Yeah, I'm in a band myself, and we've toured quite extensively around Europe. And just as your previous kind of callers have said, I'm a little bit, worried how things are going to change now with all the rules surrounding Brexit, to be honest.
What was touring like before?
Oh, it was fantastic.
Where did you go?
We would do extensive tours. I mean, we'd done kind of, before I had children, we would do 6 weeks away, so we'd tour quite a lot of European countries. But we were lucky enough to kind of be able to maybe, because there's two of us in the band, so we were lucky enough if we would, had a couple of weeks' notice of a gig, we could kind of go away for the weekend and do the gig and come back and stuff. But I just think that's likely to change now with all the different rules, and like what the previous caller said about the carnet and stuff, it's all the little things that you didn't have to worry about before that have, now come in that's made things harder.
So what are you doing then for a living?
Well, I'm a tutor, so in that respect, my same as everyone really. My job is surrounded by music, so I'm a tutor in the week, and then I'm a musician kind of on the weekends and when we tour and stuff. So everything I do is music, But yeah, I'm just really sad now with how things are likely to change, and I feel sorry for the new bands that are coming through. Like everyone said, that the smaller bands that are just starting up that want to get their feet into Europe. It just seems very difficult.
What's the name of your band?
Henry's Funeral Shoe.
Ben, I don't know if it's a bad line, but it sounded like you said the name of your band was Henry's Funeral Shoe.
No, the line's fine. Yeah.
Right. Do you want to explain what that's about?
To be honest, it's a bit of a tale behind that. So I don't think you've got long enough behind it. But I think a lot of alcohol was consumed, and the name kind of come from that. So no, I don't think we got long enough to go through the actual name of the band itself.
And when you sobered up, did anyone think that's a really dumb name? Or does it work for you?
It does. It works exactly like you said in two ways. Either somebody laughs thinking, "Oh, that's cool," or somebody laughs thinking that's ridiculous. Either way, I think it sticks.
What kind of music do you do? Is it funeral music?
No, it's not. It's rock and roll blues. It is.
And are you the singer?
No, I'm the drummer. I'm the one at the back making the noise.
And do you own the drums or rent them?
No, I own the drums. Yeah, we own all of our equipment, and we write all original songs as well. So. Yeah, the last time, same as everyone, we're just starting to kind of get a few gigs back in now. I think the last gig we did was early 2020. I think maybe the tail end of 2019.
And you said you're a dad now, Ben. If your children turn out to be musical, and I'm sure they will, would you encourage them to get into this business?
It's a good question. I definitely would. Because my parents were very supportive, and music has allowed me to see the world. I just wish I hope the same freedoms that I've benefited from, my children get to benefit from as well. So yeah, I would definitely encourage it, because I think music it has a lot of benefits for everyone.
Ben, really good to hear from you. Good luck with Henry's Funeral Shoe. I want to get Roscoe on before 5 o'clock if we can. Hi, Roscoe. Tell me about you.
Hi. Okay, well, my name's Roscoe. I'm tour manager and guitarist with an artist called Rosalie Cunningham. Sort of a COVID and Brexit-related story. The COVID side of it is we just started a tour when COVID hit. Oh. I think our last show was the 13th of March last year, and I think it was the 16th, roughly, that we went into kind of lockdown. Rosalie was struck down with COVID quite soon after that, actually. So we had kind of first-hand experience of that. So we had a whole year of touring all planned out. Sweden Rock Festival, Herzberg, some stuff in Croatia, Slovenia, Norway as well. That all got pushed aside because of COVID. Now we're coming out of that, hopefully, fingers crossed, and we're now dealing with the Brexit issue, which for us, we've had to reschedule our European tour 3 times now. Yeah. We're supposed to be going out on the 23rd of February. And with the announcement sort of yesterday, I think that all these countries are now allowing us
which does include Slovenia and Sweden. Those countries are on the list.
It does. It's also a little bit of kind of old news, I think, in the fact that we've known for a while now that certain countries like France, Germany, we've got that 90-day visa, work visa-free movement. We've had that for a while. And like many of the callers have said, the carnet and the tax as well, the amount of tax we have to pay on every single item of merch we take, as well as the carnets, like the other callers were saying, where we have to go through serial numbers and we take an awful lot of equipment. We're a 6-piece band. It actually works out cheaper for us to fly everyone in to Dortmund and hire the van, the driver and the back line in Germany.
Oh, that's interesting. Roscoe, thank you very much for the call. And that chimes with what Steve has told me on text. This means equipment, engineers, lighting, stagehands, etc. will have to be hired in the EU So even though it seems like they're making a concession to allow musicians in, they're not. It's win, win, win for them and unemployment for a load of back and front stage workers, not to mention truckers. And Jules says, music is everything. One of Britain's biggest exports. The Brexit Leave government has destroyed dreams and opportunities in its stupid, narrow-minded winning chaos. Truly unforgivable. And now, from today's podcast, Steve Allen, A Little Bit Extra, which you can catch on Global Player, here is the Steve Allen soundbite of the night.
What a boring little old baggage you turned out to be.
This is LBC, I'm Eddie Mayer. The headlines at 5 o'clock. The UK COVID figures for the last 24 hours. Deaths 86, new cases 30,000, vaccinations 200,000. Red list scramble to escape Mexico.
Unfortunately now with this inexplicable situation that we now have, that everything's all up in the air, unfortunately.
NHS England says a fifth of COVID hospital admissions are aged 18 to 35, but pings are falling.
It will be a relief to small businesses, particularly the hospitality industry, pubs, restaurants and so on, that have been struggling to staff shifts because so many people are being told to isolate.
7 men jailed for more than 200 years for murdering a law student.
We're going to live the rest of our lives without our angel. So yeah, I would like to thank the police for the hard work. I hope these people rot in prison.
Also tonight, the Mound, labelled London's worst tourist attraction. We have a report.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Eddie Mayer.
Last night, the UK government announced its latest changes to the travel rules. They come into effect for passengers returning to England, Scotland and Northern Ireland from 4 o'clock on Sunday morning. Mexico is moving to the red list, so thousands of British tourists face a scramble to get back before Sunday morning. India, Bahrain, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates changed from red to amber. And Germany, Austria and Norway are among the countries going green. Fully vaccinated people coming back to the UK from France will no longer have to quarantine, and Spain will still be on the amber list. But the Department for Transport now says that arrivals from Spain and all its islands are advised to use a PCR test as their pre-departure test wherever possible, instead of the cheaper lateral flow tests. England's Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told Tom Swarbrick on LBC this morning why the government's only advising people to take PCR tests when coming back from Spain.
With Spain, almost everybody already takes a PCR test. That's because worldwide, not specific to Spain, we specify a very high quality of tests that people need to take before they return. In most places in the world, that is, it turns out to be a PCR test. That is the case in Spain. And the specific reason for mentioning this is there's a particular variant, the B.1.621 in Spain, that our clinicians, their scientists are keeping a very close eye on. PCR tests are the best way to do that. So it's just a reminder to make sure that you've done your test. Actually, as I say, in Spain, it's already a PCR test most of the time anyway.
And that is to come back from Spain into the UK. But
correct.
That was mandated, was it? So that people coming back from Spain would have to have a PCR test in order to get back into the UK? Because now it seems to be just guidance that we'd rather you took a PCR than a lateral flow test.
So, in fact, nothing's changed, and it hasn't changed regardless of where you're coming back from. The reason that we've just made special mention of Spain is because our clinicians and scientists are working with their Spanish counterparts to keep abreast of the latest data on this particular variant. A PCR test, as your listeners, now experts in this, I'm sure each and every one probably know that you can sequence the genome once you've taken a PCR test. You can't do it from a lateral flow. But in fact,
it's important to do it, as you say, this is a slight variant of that people are keeping a watchful eye on. Why not make it mandatory? Why say to people, well, you can if you want, but actually you don't really have to. It's very expensive, some of these PCR tests. So if it's important, tell people that they have to
tells people to do it. So the answer is actually that 9 out of 10 people already take a PCR test in Spain. It happens to be the only test available in order to meet the high specification, so-called sensitivity and specificity required.
Well, that's easy for you to say. That was Grant Shapps talking to Tom Swarbrick on LBC. Tom is back tomorrow morning at 7, sitting in for Nick. Let's catch up now with Virginia Messina, Acting Chief Executive of the World Travel and Tourism Council. You listened to Grant Shapps there. I listened to him. Our listener listened to him. Was he talking sense?
Well, the other thing I listened Grant Shapps say is the fact that he felt what was announced yesterday were simplified rules. And that definitely does not make sense to us, because it's this ever-changing rules, whether it's now a recommendation, but is this constant updates of new countries going into different categories. And partly the fact that they have removed France from this Amber Plus list makes the system more consistent or perhaps simpler, but we don't quite believe that's the case. We know that the impact that all these policies and changing rules has had in our sector has been devastating.
But is the government in a no-win position? For example, there were lots of complaints about countries being on watch lists for various colours. That policy has changed, but now we have thousands of people in Mexico saying, what, you've given us no notice, we have to get back now?
I mean, that's a good point, but the problem is that the watch list completely undermines confidence as well. So there's no reason why you would eventually book a trip to a country on the watch list. So I think, yes, it's precisely this disruption that this is creating, not only on the travelers, but also on the industry to ramp up their operations. Or, for example, you have the case in Mexico, which is on the negative side, but there's other countries that have been put on the green list, whereas there's no direct flights to, for example, like Slovenia. And so it's really allowing that time. I think it's the nature of the short notice that is given to both industry and travelers to really prepare to these changes. And again, it's not allowing people to make plans in a season that is really critical to our sector.
And what about this specific advice on Spain? Arrivals from Spain and its islands advised to use a PCR test as their pre-departure test?
So as Grant Shapps was explaining, the reason for why the government wants to prioritize the use of PCR is because they can do genomic sequencing out of these tests, which means they are able to identify the particular variant that a positive COVID case would have, and therefore obviously they're able to track the importation of these variants potentially into the country. Now that's great for the government to want to do, but then potentially, I mean, the argument would be, would they not need to pay for it? Because why does this need to come at the cost of the consumer, when obviously this is completely changing the economics of travel? When you think about family of four trying to having to pay for, say, 3-4 PCR tests, that really changes the cost of the trip.
I was also struck, and I want to get your reaction to something else Grant Shapps said this morning. I'll quote him. "It is a reality that in this new world we're living with coronavirus, I think double vaccination or full vaccination is going to be a feature forevermore, and probably all countries will require full vaccination for you to enter." Forevermore? What do you think?
Well, we know not everyone can be vaccinated, whether it's age, whether it's other conditions. So, and whether it's unfortunately the fact that some regions are far behind us when it comes to the vaccination rollout. So that's why for many months now, we have said that, yes, the vaccine is absolutely critical to get this under control. We're seeing that more and more. And obviously, whilst we're still able to spread it, unfortunately, even if being fully vaccinated, it does prevent severe illness, and it does, it does lower the risk. So, but we still need other mechanisms in place for people that for any reason are not able to get vaccinated, whether it's other conditions, health conditions, or whether it's because they come from a particular region where there's not such an advanced vaccination rollout. So testing in that sense is absolutely critical. And we know we need to continue to live with these measures, whether it's physical distancing and all the other health and safety protocols.
Good to see you again. Thank you. Virginia Messina, Acting Chief Executive of the World Travel and Tourism Council. Ben Kentish is our Westminster correspondent. Ben, can you take us behind the scenes a little? These are all the headline announcements, but there's lots of talk, isn't there, that there's been a bit of briefing against Grant Shapps. He's being accused of doing various U-turns. There's lots of talk about who in Cabinet likes this policy and who doesn't. What's happening?
Yeah, there's certainly been a big disagreement in, recent months, Eddie, really, between different cabinet ministers about travel. Back when Matt Hancock, remember him, when he was health secretary, he was on the end of the argument that was effectively talking down the importance of travel this summer. I suspect he would have been quite happy, actually, if people didn't travel much at all, because, of course, health department generally the one that's most concerned with the health impact. And on the other side, you have people like Grant Shapps, Transport Secretary, Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, who, yes, of course, understand that argument, but also making the case that if travel didn't resume in some capacity, firstly, the travel industry, the aviation, tourism sectors would be decimated even further. And secondly, of course, and this is the argument that Rishi Sunak makes, the knock-on impact on the rest of the economy would be significant. So there are trade-offs here. Of course, the government recognises the need to make sure we're not importing new variants. Boris Johnson, Eddie, has been talking just in the last couple of minutes about that balance, about his desire he was talking about to let people go on holiday, but also the caution that's needed to make sure that things like testing and other requirements are in place to prevent any potentially vaccine evading variants entering the UK. So he's been talking about that. He has just said, as more countries abroad improve their vaccination rates, as more people get jabbed across the world, he does think travel will get easier and easier. But he said several times that people should not expect it to be normal this summer at least, and potentially for the foreseeable future. He has come down a bit more in recent weeks on the side of people like Rishi Sunak and Grant Shapps, who are pushing hardest for travel to be opened up. But of course, there is a very, very fine line that ministers are trying to tread between not just allowing people to go on holiday, but also allowing people to travel for business, to travel to see friends and family and loved ones they may not have seen for 18 months, and at the same time, reduce the risk as much as possible of variants coming into the country. So they believe, with the requirements that are in place, quarantine for people who aren't double jabbed, hotel quarantine for the red list, testing for pretty much everybody, that they have managed to strike that balance. But of course, Eddie, things change so quickly, and one of the criticisms they've faced is that the rules keep chopping and changing. Grant Shapps was trying to combat that this morning by promising certainty at least for the next 3 weeks, which, given how quickly things have changed, actually seems quite a long time. But ministers are in no doubt in telling people that things are going to be difficult, they could change, and that travel is going to be riskier and more cumbersome than usual, as Grant Shapps put it, for, the foreseeable future, if not forever.
Thanks, Ben. 5:15. Thomas has the headlines.
Eddie Mair on LBC.
With Sage. Boss your business admin from anywhere.
Would you like to meet Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak and talk to them about something that matters to you? Of course you would. Sebastian Payne, the Whitehall editor of the Financial Times, has been reporting on an advisory board which appears to allow people to do just that. Sebastian, tell me about this advisory board.
So it's not an easy thing to explain, Eddie, because the Conservative Party has still not really told us or anyone what it exists or who's on it or what its purpose is. My colleagues and I have been reporting over the past couple of weeks to try and figure out what it is, and the best we've been able to ascertain is that it's a club of top Tory donors, plus some other people as well, who have very frequent direct access to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. And many of the people on that advisory board have paid £250,000 to the party to get there. Some have paid more of that amount. And again, this board is not acknowledged on any party literature. They still won't tell us exactly what it does or who is on it. So it's all quite secretive. And as we know, party donors pay to give money to the Conservatives or Labour to try and influence the party's direction, to push forward policies and ideas they would like to see enacted. That's nothing new. That this advisory board, however, is another level in terms of the money being put in. And it does seem to be having, we've spoken to people who are on it, and they've said many of them are Thatcherites, they're free marketeers, they don't like the economic direction that Boris Johnson's government is going, and they're using this board to tell the Prime Minister directly, in a way that's not clearly quite accountable, what they think about his government's policies.
To ask a simple, perhaps simplistic question, is it the money that buys them the access, and does the access actually buy them influence? Because it's one thing to say something to a politician, but of course they don't have to listen, do they?
Well, of course, and the Conservative Party's response has been that donors don't influence government policy, and which in some ways is quite laughable, because you would say, well, why are these people giving money? They're not obviously doing it out of the goodness of their hearts.
Well, on the response, let's have a listen to Grant Shapps on BBC Radio this morning. Here he is.
I have to say that there are a lot of people in this country who believe in this country and want to see it prosper, and may have views about what will, the things to do that will make the country prosper. And so supporting a political party should not, in my view, be painted as some sort of immoral act. I think when people stand up for their beliefs and support a party, whether that's by joining a political party at local constituency level or indeed donating to a political party, there's nothing inherently bad or wrong about that. It doesn't change any policies, but you're certainly welcome to hear about the policies.
What do you say, Sebastian?
Well, obviously, that's the government's clear response on this, and it's always very difficult to link a conversation between an actual policy. But one of the things we found in the FT's research is that a quarter of the Conservative Party's donors are now property developers, and that's risen significantly from about 12% under David Cameron and Theresa May's leadership. And you may say it's a coincidence, but there's no doubt the government is overseeing the biggest planning reform that the UK has seen since the Second World War, and it's not a surprise that many of these property developers are going to benefit from that. So drawing a link between those donations and this liberalisation of planning, I think, is a fair thing to certainly do. And all these donors do share an ideological similarity with the Conservative Party. You don't see trade unions donating to the Tories, do you? In the same way you don't see free marketeers giving money to the Labour Party. So there is an ideological similarity, and I think the most influence probably comes at election time, when the campaigns are running and the manifestos are being drawn together, and institutions like this advisory board are a way of people shaping and trying to influence politicians. And Mr. Shapps said there's nothing inherently wrong with it. I would agree with that. I think that, it can be a healthy thing for businesses to have interaction with politicians. But what is not healthy is the party having secretive organisations where we don't know who's involved, what purpose there is, or what conversations take place. That's where we need more clarity and transparency, and it would wash away any accusations that there's untoward things happening.
Let me ask you a little bit more, because you mentioned Labour, and your story in the FT this morning reports Conservative claims that Labour does something pretty similar.
So Labour has this thing called the Chair's Circle, which is open to Labour Party members, where they can pay £5,000 and they join this group, and they get various meetings and other things that, normal Labour Party members don't get. And it includes an annual brunch with Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, events at various party conferences. And again, this is all a way for people to express their views and get a better sense of what's going on inside the party. The difference between the advisory board and the Chair's Circle, though, first of all, is one of scale. It's £5,000 in terms of an annual donation to be in Labour's top tier. The Conservative one we've reported is £250,000. That's a big difference there. And the second thing is, Labour Party isn't in power, and based on the opinion polls, isn't going to be in power for the foreseeable future. So there's a big difference between trying to influence a party who's in government and is doing things like planning reform, and an opposition party that is simply, in Parliament trying to hold the government to account there. And also with Labour's Chair's Circle, all the details are publicly available on its website. You can see what you get from it. We still don't know anything more about the advisory board because the Tories won't tell us.
Sebastian, thank you. Sebastian Payne, the Whitehall editor of the Financial Times. 7 men have been jailed for a total of 216 years for the murder of a law student in Lancashire. Reporting for LBC Live, Stacey Holdsworth.
19-year-old Aya Hashim was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
It happened, basically, I saw the car, saw the gun, and they started shooting on me. She was just walking around.
So you think that they were shooting at you initially, and then caught her instead? Responsive? Is she breathing?
No.
The Lebanese-born law student was mistakenly gunned down in a drive-by shooting in Blackburn in May last year when she was shopping for groceries. The shooting was instigated by Faraz Suleiman, owner of RI Tyres. It was to do with an ongoing rivalry with the proprietor of Quick Shine Car Wash next door. He was the intended target. It's believed the long-running feud began when Quickshine Car Wash started to sell tyres, putting them in direct competition. 7 people who each played individual roles in the planning and execution of the shooting were found guilty of Aya's murder. They were sentenced to life with a minimum totalling 216 years. The judge said to the men, "It wasn't long before most of you started to sacrifice your co-defendants in an attempt to save your own skins." DCI Zoe Russo says it took many police hours to get justice for Aya.
We made 23 arrests along the way. The defendants used every tactic they could to evade detection. And in the case of Ennis and Raja, they fled the country. So we had inquiries overseas in order to identify their whereabouts and look to bring them back to the UK so that justice could be served. And that's what we have done.
The parents of murdered Aya Hashem say their dreams for their role model daughter were crushed into pieces by her killers. Aya was studying law at Salford University with the hope of becoming a barrister. Her brother Ibrahim gave a statement to the press after the sentencing.
We saw the people that killed my sister. It wasn't easy. But all I can say is I'm glad that a lot of other people are going to be safe. No one else is going to be hurt by these people. We're going to live our rest of our lives without our angel. So yeah, I would like to thank the police for the hard work. I hope these people rot in prison. That's all I'm going to say.
Stacey Holdsworth reporting for LBC. We spent a lot of time on yesterday's programme talking about the big announcement on vaccines for 16 and 17-year-olds. Well, today, NHS England said that more than a fifth of people admitted to hospital with COVID are aged between 18 and 34. Dr. Ghulam Rahat Khan is an NHS emergency medicine doctor who works on an ICU ward. Thanks very much for joining us. Tell me, if you would, what you have observed.
Thank you for having me. I agree with the data that's been outcome of recently. That we are seeing more young peoples, and especially the pregnant women will coming more in ICU, and generally the more peoples are affecting with this new variant, young people, compared to the first wave in December 2019 and then 2020. We've seen so many patients, elderly population mostly we used to see in ITU, but in last couple of months, most admissions in the critical care or the emergency medicine entrance to the emergency medicine doors are young peoples with the symptoms.
Why do you think that is? What's made that change happen?
I think they were on this age population was least prioritized for the vaccination, and there is a logic behind it. Obviously, the elderly populations are more vulnerable. And they were on the bottom of the list. So the vaccine and also the personal choice. So many people didn't want to have the vaccines, with lots of myths around the media and everywhere. And especially for the pregnant women, they were very hesitant what they should have done to take the vaccine or not. And that was a problem, I think. And it's very sad to see sometimes, even recently I've seen a very young 27-year-old lady with advanced pregnancy with the extensive COVID. So this is sad, and she didn't opted to take the vaccines, although she was offered. I'm not judgmental. I'm saying that possibly there is a logic why she chose this. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons that the people didn't take the vaccine. It won't give the 100% protection, but still it saves life, because nowadays we don't see elderly people coming to the hospital.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Good luck with your work. Dr. Ghulam Rahat Khan, an NHS emergency medicine doctor who works on an ICU ward. 5:30 on LBC. Thomas Watts has the news.
Eddie Mair on LBC.
With Sage, take control of your local business.
In the next few minutes, what it's like trying to get back to the UK from Mexico before Sunday. It's something thousands of people are trying to do. We'll report from a new tourist attraction in London, which has been described as London's worst tourist attraction. And in a moment, the very latest on the cladding scandal. Right now, the LBC Business News with Chris Justin from 7 Investment Management. Mike Ashley in the news.
He is, again, he's the founder of Sports Direct for people who don't know who he is or what he does, and also the owner of Frasers Group. But the news is that he's due to step down as CEO from that retail empire that he's built. He's a very colourful personality, so often draws headlines. But part of the interest in this story today is that his successor, currently in charge of modernising their stores as head of Elevation, is also his future son-in-law, engaged to his daughter. Quite. Michael Murray is his name. He does have a track record of transforming stores and turning around parts of the business, although it is a big step up into the limelight, and the responsibility of steering a business with 20,000 employees and 1,000 shops is significant. Although I'd imagine Mr. Ashley won't be far away. He does still own 64% of the group, as kind of alluded to at the beginning, and he'll be staying on as an executive director as well. So perhaps more business as usual than the headlines suggest, as it's not your conventional company.
No, but you'd imagine that a head of Elevation is going to have no trouble stepping up. Let's talk about inflation.
Yeah, quite. So this is the Bank of England warning that inflation will hit 4% this year. It is their job, clearly, to manage expectations and make sure that they're keeping tabs on the temperature of the economy. 4%, for context, is double the 2% rate that they like to aim for, although the Monetary Policy Committee believes that the effects pushing inflation as a headline figure higher will be temporary. So they've maintained interest rates. Interest rates are essentially the leash put on the economy if it's overheating at 0.1% still. So not great news for savers. But it's the economic recovery bouncing back from last year's recession that's pushing prices higher. Everything from energy costs being up and supply chain bottlenecks occurring as a result of all that post-lockdown surge in demand has pushed up wages as well. Staff shortages too. So all of these things conspire to make things slightly more expensive. The bank doesn't seem worried, though, although I would say that one of the 8 people on the committee voted to reduce the scale of all the monetary stimulus in play at the moment. I think that will be a continuing debate as they try to balance providing support for the recovery as it continues to gather pace with the vagaries inflation. So they meet every single month, and I imagine we'll be talking this an awful lot more, and people will be a lot more concerned about how many people are voting which way of the 8 over the coming weeks and months.
Chris, thanks. Chris Justin with the LBC Business News. Our correspondent Rachel Venables has done a lot of work over the months, hearing from people caught up in the cladding scandal. And Rachel often reports brand new details here on LBC. We're going to hear from Rachel, by the way, on another story in just a second. But I just wanted to highlight her role here on LBC in reporting the cladding scandal. And we've devoted a lot of time on this programme to hearing from people affected and talking about what's needed. Sophie Bishner bought her flat in Stevenage just before the fire at Grenfell in 2017 for £230,000, but like thousands of other homes, it's now deemed unsafe. Hi, Sophie, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Tell me about, it's always exciting buying a place and getting a new place. Tell me about the flat when you bought it. Why did you like it?
I think I was 24 or so when I bought my flat, so it was really my first step on the property ladder, being able to move out of my parents' house and try and avoid the cycle of renting that so many people go through. My property is quite close to London. I work in London, so it was a great place for me to after a long wait finally get the keys and move into these apartments.
And I imagine, like everyone who gets a mortgage, it's a stretch. Buying a place is expensive.
Yeah, and also terrifying as a first-time buyer, all of the things that you hear about that you never knew existed and having to pay for all the legal advice and the searches. It's a bit of a minefield at the start. So
you had all of that, but you successfully moved in. And then, of course, the Grenfell fire happened and all those lives lost. And then it became clear that there were lots of buildings around the UK with unsafe cladding, and yours is one of them.
Yeah, so our building doesn't have the Grenfell style cladding. It has non-ACM cladding, but also has a whole host of other fire safety defects like missing fire breaks, potentially flammable insulation, missing smoke seals on our front doors and the communal doors, and missing exit signage and emergency lightings and things. So a whole host of issues that were potentially present in Grenfell as well, but are definitely present in many, many buildings up and down the country.
This is something that you and other people where you live have been dealing with now for years, but we wanted to talk to you tonight because you've just had your half-yearly service charge notice.
Yeah, so we've kind of known for over a year now that this was going to be an issue with our building. So since that date, really no one's been able to sell if they were looking to or move on, knowing that the building was essentially valued at £0. And we knew that there was going to be obviously a huge cost for remediation because you're going to have to put scaffolding up. You're essentially going to have to take what's on the walls off and put it back on again and fix the insulation and everything. But when we got our bill through yesterday, it was just like an astounding amount of money. So it was actually £4.9 million for 73 properties, which works out at £208,000 per property. So yeah, to have that in writing as your debt essentially through the post or over an email as it was pretty distressing.
Oh, I mean, what on earth? What was your initial response when you clicked on that email? Because you bought the flat for $230,000 and your share of this bill is almost that amount again.
Yeah, so I mean, with the scale of this crisis in the country, we knew this was coming. So at least we had a bit of warning that this was going to be a big bill. We knew it was going to be a big bill. And we do have the slight hope that the Building Safety Fund may help us cover some of the money. The last estimate was that they may cover about 10 million, but that would obviously still leave about 5 million with us, which is about 50,000 per person. We're quite lucky in that respect, but there are obviously many properties, like buildings under 18 metres, who are potentially getting loans from the government, but they're not sure what or when. And also, I own all of my property, but there are lots of people who are shared owners who own 50% and would still be liable for that whole £200,000 if the government didn't help to fund it.
What are you going to do?
As I've done for the last year, sit tight and hope that the government realises that this problem has to be resolved, that leaseholders can't afford £50,000 to £200,000 worth of remediation on these buildings, and this has to be fully funded. Or we need to figure out why there are so many buildings up and down the country who are missing fire breaks, missing emergency signage, missing smoke seals, and lots of that was against building regulations. So there is someone out there who was responsible for those decisions and putting this building together as it was put together, and those people have to be held accountable.
Sophie, good to see you. Thank you. Sophie Bitchner. The £2 million Marble Arch Mound, an elevated viewing platform overlooking Marble Arch in central London, has been described by some as London's worst tourist attraction. Initially, in the few days it was actually open recently, people had to pay to go up it. Well, the news is it's going to be open to the public free of charge from Monday. Reporting for LBC from the Mound, our correspondent Rachel Venables.
Well, look, I'd seen the pictures, but they hadn't quite prepared me for the reality of this slightly sagging, hollow plastic hill in the middle of a roundabout here, really just plonked in central London, looking down at Marble Arch. And this is, of course, the Marble Arch Mound, now infamous, an 82-foot tall artificial hill that was meant to be lush and green and beautiful and attract visitors back to the West End. And it cost £2 million to put up. Sadly, at the moment, though, it's a bit more brown and plastic white than green and covered in pigeons and surrounded by scaffolding, although some of the flowers have started to bloom lower down slightly. The mound itself opened last week. Really, it was far too early. It closed after just 2 days, after a fair bit of derision and confusion. It's going to reopen again from Monday, but next week Westminster City Council say it will be free to visit after they originally charged people up to £8 a ticket to walk up it and take some pictures. So I've been finding out what local people make of the infamous mound.
That's a little bit extortionate. Maybe you put a bar up there, people might go. I don't think it necessarily brings tourists to the area. I think people want to come to Oxford Street and Hyde Park and they just stumble across it.
Just the overall look of it. I mean, would you have wanted to pay £8 to go to the top?
Yeah, that looks like a complete mess, to be honest. Especially if it's just blown $2 million on that and then don't take any funds back. Like, what's the point of having it?
I've seen the whole construction and I think it looks fantastic now. I was a bit pessimistic at first. But I think it looks great, and from an engineering perspective, quite incredible. It's a generous gesture to allow people to go up it for nothing.
What's your opinion of it? How would you...
I've been wondering what it is, to be honest.
every time I pass it, but I'm not sure what it is at the moment.
What is it then? What's inside it?
Nothing, it's empty.
I mean, quite honestly, I think it's a bit of an eyesore, but there you go.
Yeah. Would you have paid £8 to go to the top of that?
I might have done if they paid me £8.
Now it's free, would you go up the top?
Probably not.
Well, Labour councillors at Westminster City Council have now called for an investigation into this. They say they want answers to ensure the fiasco is not repeated. Remember, again, £2 million was spent to put this up. Westminster Council have apologised and they've also admitted mistakes have been made.
Rachel Venables reporting. It's 5:45. Thomas Watts has the headlines.
Eddie Mair on LBC.
With Sage. Pay your people accurately, quickly and on time.
It's 5:50. A man has appeared in court charged with murdering a 5-year-old boy. Reporting for LBC from Cardiff, Daniel Bevan.
3 people have appeared in court in connection with the death of 5-year-old Logan Mwangi, including the child's stepfather and mother. John Cole, who's 39 and from the Sarn area of Bridgend in South Wales, appeared at Cardiff Magistrates Court charged with the murder of the young boy who was reported missing in the early hours of Saturday morning. Sadly, the same day, Logan's body was found just a short walk away from his home in the River Ogmore. He was taken to the nearby Princess of Wales Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Since then, dozens of tributes have been laid next to the bank of the river where he was found. The grass is lined with teddies, flowers and messages from local people who are trying to come to terms with what's happened. Now, 2 other people, Logan's mother, 30-year-old Angharad Williamson, who is also from the Sarn area of Bridgend, and a 13-year-old boy, who cannot be named because of his age, have also appeared at Cardiff Magistrates Court, charged with perverting the course of justice. Cole is also facing that charge as well, and all of them will be appearing at Newport Crown Court on Friday. Following the charges, Senior Investigating Officer Detective Chief Inspector Mark O'Shea from South Wales Police says this is an extremely harrowing case for all involved, and I extend my deepest sympathies to Logan's family and friends. I'm grateful to the local community for its support and understanding while we've continued to gather evidence across several scenes. He went on to say we continue to appeal to anyone who might have information in relation to the incident to contact the Major Crimes Investigation Team.
Daniel Bevan reporting. The UK will host the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, which is its full title. It's shortened to COP26. It'll take place in Glasgow from the 31st of October to the 12th of November. It's a big deal for Scotland, for Britain and for the planet. But there are reports that all is not well. Reporting for LBC from Glasgow, Phil MacDonald.
So much is riding on this summit that kicks off in less than 3 months' time. Tens of thousands of delegates from across the world will arrive in Glasgow aiming to change the course of history. When leaders met in Paris 6 years ago, a plan was drawn up. And this upcoming conference in Glasgow is intended to mark a turning point in the fight against climate change. But there appears to be squabbles in the UK camp less than 100 days before the meeting. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer visited a wind farm in Glasgow this morning where he claimed that Scottish Government targets on energy had been missed.
Thousands of jobs were promised in offshore wind. Thousands of jobs, 28,000 I think, and only about 1 in 20 has materialised. Now we know that wind energy is the future, and so that failure means we're behind the curve. So my message to the SNP is accept that failure. It was often said to me, well, the SNP are a progressive party. You're not progressive if you're not dealing with climate change.
The Scottish Government has defended its environmental policies, saying it will shortly be launching a Green Jobs Workforce Academy to help people get the skills they need to move into new, greener jobs, pointing to a £100 million fund that's been set up to make it possible. But it's not just the SNP at the centre of Sir Keir Starmer's criticism. On the first day of his Scottish visit, he called out Boris Johnson over his leadership going into COP26. Well, the Prime Minister has also been north of the border today, visiting an offshore wind farm. He says the UK's green future is a bright one ahead of the Glasgow summit in November.
I think it's a fantastic look for this country that we are the world leader now in offshore wind power, where we generate more offshore wind even than China. And what we've got is the potential to export not just the the technology, but the human skills as well around the world.
When Glasgow was announced as the host city for COP26 back in 2019, spirits and ambitions were high. Number 10 was reportedly confident major commitments could be secured that would see countries pledge to take drastic action to reduce emissions. But fast forward to today, confidence appears to have plunged. The eyes of world leaders are focused on COVID recovery and tense political standoffs, meaning there's little agreement on even interim targets.
Phil McDonald reporting for LBC from Glasgow. Quick follow-up to something we did last night. It's always nice to report good news as a result of something that happened here. As you'll remember, we talked a great deal about the announcement from the JCVI yesterday, just updating its thinking on vaccines, COVID vaccines for, well, principally people aged 16 and 17, but also talking about what ought to happen for children aged 12 to 15. And it's been the case for some time. There are a few people in that age group are allowed to have the vaccine because of health conditions they may have or that people in their family may have. But we heard from so many listeners who got in touch to say, I can't get vaccines for my 12 to 15-year-old who is entitled because, well, sometimes the vaccine centres say, no, they're not allowed. We heard about a GP saying the same thing. Anyway, our guest last night, Professor Beate Kampmann, joined us and responded to a question from a listener. And I think the professor's advice was, look, the advice is there online. She advised, look, print it off and take it to whoever's saying no, your GP or the vaccine centre, and show them that, you know, this is fine, they're allowed to do it. Anyway, a text has come in from Jane. Thank you, she says. Yesterday you raised the point that people can't get jabs, and I can't get jabs for my sons with Professor Kampmann. I followed her advice, and the GP has now written a case for us to get them both vaccinated. Happy to help. Thousands of British tourists are trying to get back from Mexico before 4 o'clock on Sunday morning when they'll have to quarantine because last night the UK government added Mexico to the red list. Guy Forbat is in Mexico, just south of Cancun, I believe. Guy, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you, Eddie. I'm okay.
When did you arrive? Why did you want to go to Mexico?
So I'm a teacher and it was my wife's birthday and it was our second wedding anniversary. So we thought, let's go to Mexico. Yes, we knew it was on the amber list. It was a bit more complicated, but we haven't got kids and we just thought, let's go for it. So we booked in February knowing that it might get cancelled and we've had a couple of weeks. So in that respect, we're quite happy that we've had a good run in. And then yesterday, everything turned to complete carnage and we were trying to find a flight back. In emergency time. How did you
hear the news? Are you an ardent follower of Grant Shapps' Twitter feed?
Unfortunately not for Grant, but I was in a cafe. Luckily we had Wi-Fi. My brother messaged me. I thought it was a joke actually, because it's the sort of thing he'd do. Oh. And then we very quickly realised that it was not a joke. So it was panic stations, go on to BA, try and book. It was going to be an additional £1,200, but that's less than the quarantine, run back to the accommodation, couldn't find a credit card. It was very stressful.
When were you due to come home?
So we were due to come home on Wednesday, so it's not a huge problem compared to other families I'm aware that just touched down to find out the information.
Oh, you've spoken to people who didn't have the luxury of having a couple of weeks' holiday first.
Yeah, so we went onto Twitter and I was in a conversation with someone that was literally 7 minutes into Mexico and got onto the Wi-Fi in the airport to find that they had to go straight home.
The price of your flights home, I mean, my guess is, because this has happened in lots of other locations in recent months, the prices go up. Demand is huge.
Yeah, so in some respects we were lucky because we booked direct with BA, so you can flexibly go and change the flight for the additional cost, which wasn't cheap. I mean, they have said on the BBC website, I checked, they said that they were doing it for no additional charge. I don't know if that's going to come to anything, but I mean, we were lucky enough that we were able to just whack it on a credit card and not think about the implication. I know that many families may not have had that option.
When do you get back then?
So fingers crossed. Again, other things that we're lucky with, we've got a car so we can drive to the airport without trying to get transport across the country. Tomorrow morning, we're going to get to the airport. It may be complete bedlam. Who knows? We've got tickets to a flight direct and we'll get back on Saturday.
And Guy, for the benefit of the many, many people who just haven't been able to get away for forever, let's live vicariously through you. Just paint a picture of how wonderful your holiday's been.
Well, we did go to one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. For the first week, we then went to an old colonial town to visit some sinkholes. They're called cenotes. We've been eating delicious food. I had tacos for breakfast, and I'm currently sitting in a hot tub with the sun beaming down on me. So I have to say, life could be worse.
Tacos for breakfast?
Absolutely. Have you never tried it, Eddie?
No. And I'm glad I won't be sitting next to you on the flight. Guy, thanks so much. Have a safe flight home, and I hope it all goes according to plan. Guy Forbat in Mexico, live from a hot tub. This is LBC. I'm Eddie Mayer. The headlines at 6 o'clock. The UK COVID figures for the last 24 hours. Deaths 86. New cases 30,000. And vaccinations 200,000. Red list scramble to escape Mexico.
We know that the impact that all these policies and changing rules has had in our sector has been devastating.
Pings fall, but NHS England says a fifth of COVID hospital admissions are aged 18 to 35.
It will be a relief to small businesses, particularly the hospitality industry, pubs, restaurants and so on, that have been struggling to staff shifts because so many people are being told to isolate.
7 men jailed for more than 200 years for murdering a law student.
We're going to live the rest of our lives without our angel. So yeah, I would like to thank the police for the hard work. I hope these people rot in prison.
This hour, do you know from personal experience what it's like to live on the national minimum wage? Call me.
This is LBC. From Global, leading Britain's conversation with Eddie Mayer.
This hour, I'd love to hear from you if you get the national minimum wage or national living wage. Call it what you will. You know what it's like to live on. And I think the rest of us should hear it. Tell me, if you would, about your working day, your take-home pay. How much money is left when you have paid for food, the roof over your head and essential bills? 0345 6060 973, the national minimum or living wage. Perhaps as a result of the pandemic, you are suddenly and unexpectedly on the minimum wage. I wonder what the adjustment's been like. Most people, I guess, would find it hard to live on. But if you know what it's like, please tell me. The Low Pay Commission estimates that in April 2019, there were 2 million workers paid at or below the minimum wage. That's around 7% of all workers in the UK. 2 million people on the minimum wage, and that was before COVID. So tell me, if you would, what living on the minimum wage, living on the living wage, call it what you will, is like for you, because this is about the numbers, this is about the money and the effect it has on your life. You're working hard, you're probably working long hours on the minimum wage. Tell me what it's like. 0345 6060 973. We are talking about this tonight because, as lots of people reported, and I'll quote Mail Online, John Lewis, Pret-a-Manger and The Body Shop have been named and shamed by the government for failing to pay their staff the minimum wage. The Business Department today publishes a list of 191 companies which have underpaid workers, including some household names. In total, the list of breaches between 2011 and 2018 resulted in firms paying back £2.1 million to more than 34,000 workers. They were also hit with fines of more than £3 million. And the Mail went on. John Lewis, which also owns Waitrose, failed to pay more than £941,000 to more than 19,000 staff because of a policy of averaging pay to part-time workers to help them budget. Pret-a-Manger underpaid 33 of its staff by just shy of £10,000, while The Body Shop failed to pay more than 34 grand to just under 1,000 workers. Other firms listed by the government included one-stop shops, McCall's, Welcome Break service stations Enterprise Rent-A-Car and Pontins. It says firms often inadvertently break the law by deducting money for uniforms or accommodation from staff or failing to correctly pay workers for overtime. We'll talk about all of this with the government minister in just a moment. But if you're living it, I'd like to hear from you. As I say, it may be you were in a much better paid job and then COVID struck. And now you know what it's like to live on the national minimum wage. Or perhaps this has been your life for some time. How do you budget? What's it like to try to make ends meet on the minimum wage? 0345 60 60 973. You don't have to give your name if you don't want to. You can also text 84850 and tweet at LBC. The national minimum or living wage for those aged 23 and over is £8.91 an hour. And it's lower for workers who are younger. So tell me what it's like for you. 0345 60 60 973. And we welcome to the programme Paul Scully, the Business Minister and Conservative MP for Sutton and Cheam. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much, Eddie. Good to speak to you, and thank you for raising this issue tonight.
Naming and shaming. Tell me why that's done.
So it's done because effectively if these companies have broken the law, now some of them may be technical, not everything is advertent and deliberate, but nonetheless, even a technical breach, it means that someone is going without a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. And so it's important that we call these people out and hopefully they will change their behaviour. Many already have done so. It also allows us to remind employers that the fact that they should be looking at the guidelines on gov.uk website to make sure they're adhering to the law and to the letter of the law. And also for employees who may be like the kind of people that you're trying to get to call in, to remember that if they are not getting paid that fair day's wage, that they can ring ACAS, they can raise this for HMRC to investigate to make sure they can get recompense.
Do you have any sense of what proportion of these companies that have been caught are doing it by mistake?
No, I don't. I don't overall, but I think there's 40-odd% that are doing this because of deductions, maybe because of uniforms or other expenses. There's about 30% that are underpaying because of hours worked, maybe overtime that they've not looked at in the right way, and there's a percentage that have also not paid the right apprentice rate as well. So for us, it's not a matter of whether it's deliberate or accidental. You still have your responsibility towards the lowest paid in our society. And when we're trying to recover the economy at this difficult time, and I know it's difficult for these employers as well as it is for so many people, we don't want to have that recovery on the back of the lowest paid in society.
And your view is that anyone who is making life for people on the lowest wages more difficult, they deserve to be shamed?
Well, we want to call them out. We want to make sure that, first of all, they don't do it again. And then, as I said, a number of the 191 employers on there have already changed their processes, and that's really to be welcomed. That's what it's all about. But it's also, as I say, a lesson for others that please do look at the gov.uk website if you're an employer, and make sure that you're not falling foul, even if it's a technical breach of those laws, because someone at the end of the day is getting paid less as a result.
And thinking of the people who are struggling to get by on minimum wage, do you know how many people on minimum wage also have to claim universal credit?
I don't have that figure with me at the moment, Eddie, but clearly a number of those will be on in-work benefit. So we'll be working on universal credit, because that's why the flexibility of universal credit was introduced in the first place, to make sure that they can increase the support that they get for a full week's work, if you like.
And do you think, thinking of the people who are struggling to get by on minimum wage, that the government should be named and shamed or called out for abolishing the £20 a week increase in universal credit?
Well, I think, first of all, don't forget, I'm glad you at least phrased it in a way that it's abolishing an uplift, because it is an increase. It was something there that recognising the difficulty that was there before.
And the difficulty hasn't gone away. I'm asking you whether you think the government needs to be called out for abolishing it.
But nonetheless, we have to look at the public finances. We have to look at the universal credit in a holistic way. So we put emergency measures in. We put emergency measures in place.
£100 billion on HS2.
Well, that's you're talking. There are plenty of examples that you can put alongside each other.
£250 million on the national yacht.
HS2 is there to connect people. It's about capacity. It's about making sure that we can, we always talk about levelling up. What does levelling up mean? It means that potential.
Well, couldn't we start by levelling up for the people who've got least money?
Well, what it means is that we can actually widen our economic base to increase the opportunity for employment, for better employment for those people outside London and the South East, which is so much of our time.
If you're on minimum wage and you're losing this increase in universal credit, you're not going to be able to afford a train ticket.
What we're looking at, though, Eddie, that's what I mean about holistic, because clearly we want to make sure that we're building back fairer, to make sure that we're looking after the people that are lowest paid in society.
Building back fairer, looking after the poorest people by cutting universal credit. Are you listening to yourself?
You've gone back to the cutting universal credit. What we have put in place, we put in emergency measures in place, and as the economy starts to. So we're not cutting universal credit.
Yes,
we're restoring to where we're going back to where it was.
What do you mean you're not cutting universal credit?
Well, as I say, the reason I said to you at the beginning that you talked about removing the uplift that we put in as an emergency
let's not pretend
measure.
You're not cutting it. If you're getting universal credit now, you're going to be £20 a week worse off come the autumn.
We're going back to where it was for those people that were on universal credit.
That's right. It's a cut.
The emergency measures. Because the economic recovery, this means that we can start to reopen the economy. We can start to regain opportunities for people to actually get into work, get into better work as well. Because that's the key thing.
Are all the people we're going to talk about going to get better paid work then? All of the people we're talking about minimum wage, this recovery you're talking about, they're going to get more money, are they?
If you increase employment opportunities, if you increase the prosperity of businesses to be able to trickle down money to those
trickle down economics.
Well, look, I've been, I don't know about you, Eddie, but for 25 years, I've employed people. I've been responsible for other people's livelihoods. I've gone without. I've not paid my mortgage because I wanted to make sure my employees got paid and were able to pay their bills. And I've never, ever paid minimum wage because you always, as a good employer, you'll always invest in your people. You'll always do that bit better because that is what any good business is based on.
Are businesses that pay minimum wage bad employers?
I think there's always things that they can do better. We got to make sure that we can have a higher wage, higher productivity, higher efficient economy, and that's what we're striving for in building back better. That's
you could just increase the minimum wage, I guess. That would make them pay more.
Well, the minimum wage is actually driving employers' behaviour, but employers don't have to look at what's the lowest common denominator for that. They can always add to this. That's why, because they're always obviously on costs for people that are just above that level themselves. But employers will be looking at how to invest in their people, and
if they don't want to, the taxpayer will pick up the tab with universal credit.
I think that universal credit actually allows greater flexibility than the systems that we've had before to allow people to actually stay in work, and then from when you're in work, it's far easier to look for more opportunities themselves as we're recovering the economy, increasing those opportunities for people to take advantage of.
Thanks so much for talking to us. We appreciate it. That's Paul Scully, the Business Minister, Conservative MP for Sutton and Cheam. I'd like to hear your experience of being on the minimum or living wage. What is it like for you? 0345 6060 973. And perhaps you have been shortchanged, which is what the government's trying to draw our attention to today. Either way, let me know. 0345 6060 973. Thomas Watts has the news.
Eddie Mair on LBC.
With Sage, powering local businesses to boss it.
We had a moment ago from Paul Scully, the Business Minister, talking about calling out companies which failed for whatever reason to pay the minimum wage. If you've been on the receiving end of that, do tell me. But in any event, if you're on the minimum wage, the living wage, call it what you will, what's it like? 0345 6060 973. Katie Schmacher is Deputy Director of Policy and Partnerships for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Welcome to the programme. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Eddie.
Living on the living wage can't be easy for anyone.